Well, good afternoon, everybody. Although Jerry sent a Happy New Year message to me, I quite happy to accept that Happy New Year message on behalf of all of us in the Truth and Justice, Teresa, Steve, and Brendan. So consider Jerry as having sent you Happy New Year wishes. I think we're all entitled to presume that. Okay. First of all, I'm going to just read a couple of paragraphs from Richard Leo's book. Here we go. So this is, again, from Police Interrogation and American Justice by Richard Leo. This is page 134. Moving the suspect from denial to admission. Once the interrogator has obtained the suspect's implicit or explicit waiver, typically memorialized by his initials at the bottom of a Miranda advisement form, the tone, content, and force of the interrogation may change dramatically. It is typically after the Miranda moment that the interrogation process becomes accusatorial. Detectives shift from asking the suspect questions to telling him the answers and imploring him to confess. To be sure, there are different styles of interrogation. Some detectives remain as friendly as they were in the softening up phase, even as they begin to employ calculated psychological techniques. Others become more assertive and controlling, yet retain a non-threatening demeanor. Still others become outwardly aggressive, sometimes even badgering. Regardless of the detective's interpersonal style, however, the modus operandi of the interrogation process remains the same: to obscure the detective's adversarial role and goal of incrimination by creating the illusion that he and the suspect share a mutual interest, to lead the suspect to perceive that the interrogator's role is to help him achieve this interest, and to persuade the suspect that he can do so only by complying with the detective's requests. At the root of virtually every interrogation is the message, communicated implicitly or explicitly, that the suspect stands to receive intangible or tangible benefits and avoid harms in exchange for admission, ideally a full confession, to some version of the offence. Every interrogator must confront the dilemma of how to persuade a suspect that confessing is in his rational self-interest. Compared to a salesman in even the most despised of industries, interrogators are at a distinct disadvantage because the product they are selling, incrimination and incarceration, would top just about anybody's list of undesirables. But at the same time, interrogators possesses institutional powers and the corresponding ability to deceive, manipulate, and coerce their targets that most salesmen can only dream about. As we have seen since the early 1940s, the interrogation training industry has been devising techniques, methods, and strategies to overcome the inherent dilemma of interrogation and move the suspect from denial to admission, and then ideally to a full confession. Detectives do this not only by hiding their adversarial role, but also by transforming the suspect's perception of his situation, his opinions, and the likely consequences of each choice, such that he comes to see the act of confessing as offering the easiest escape from the hopeless situation and is in his self-interest. Interrogators seek to persuade the suspect that he is trapped and powerless, to diminish his self-confidence, to deny the detective's accusations, and to offer him a way to seemingly minimize his culpability and mitigate his punishment if he provides a statement. The suspect's admission is, in effect, his quid pro quo for an end to the interrogation and avoidance of the worst case scenario, harsher treatment or punishment, for example, that the detectives want him to believe will occur if he persists in denying their accusations. Well, we know perfectly well that obviously in the case of Brendan, they got exactly what they wanted. Not quite so with Steve. Steve's been wrongfully convicted before. He spent 18 years for a crime he didn't commit. He is much more savvy. Although there are moments of, as we shall look, there are moments of weakness and confusion. So this is the Miranda warning that was signed by Steve. The Miranda warning, the standard: you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to consult with a lawyer before questioning and to have a lawyer present with you during your questioning. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you at public expense before or during any questioning, if you so wish. And of course, immediately after the Miranda warning, you get the waiver. Do you understand each of these rights? Realizing that you have these rights, are you now willing to talk with me? Signed, Stephen Avery. Witnessed, Mark Wiegert, Tom Fassbender. So that was his waiving of Miranda. So if we go back to the very top here, just do my usual check and make sure that everything's working as it should do. Yeah, that's good. Okay, we've got a whole load of arrest report documents. This one, obviously, the interview of Stephen Avery, execution of search warrant, arrest warrant, Fassbender, Wiegert. Location of event 1, 5,000 Memorial Drive, Two Rivers. This one at Whitelaw. Auto Trader. Norbs. Norbs is the owners of the car crusher. And on this occasion, Denmark is not just across the English Channel, but is in fact part of Denmark. And of course, Avery's Auto Salvage is a business in auto salvage. Stephen Allen Avery, white male, birth date. I always get these confused. It's July 9th, 1962. It's the year before the month with the American system, which is fair enough. 43 years. Height 506. Weight 218 pounds. Hair colour blonde or strawberry. Oh well. And his address 12932 Avery Road, Two Rivers, Wisconsin. Alan Avery, Pa, 68-year-old. Yeah, that's 5'6", 506. Pa's a bit bigger, 5'10". Crivets, it's been up in the Charles Avery, 51 years old at the time, born in 1954. Christopher is Chuck's son. Obviously, there was another son that unfortunately was lost his life in a car crash, I believe. And of course, Carla. Obviously, we know about Dolores. We'll quickly skip her age because I'm sure she wouldn't be thanking us for showing that. Earl at the time was 35. Interesting, Bobby is on this form. He was 19 at the time. And of course, Brian, aged 20 years. We've also got here Robert Fabian, Barb, I'll skip her age so that, okay, she was 41 at the time. And of course, Rowley Johnson is the person who actually owned Steve's trailer and the gun. He was 67 years old at the time. Of course, another subject is Jody Stokowski. He's 36 years old, so a few years younger than Steve. Next we've got Tammy Webber. Tammy is mentioned as being the person that said to Steve, one cop told another cop told me that the vehicle was moved onto your property. Obviously, Teresa Marie Halbach, 25 years old, March 22nd, 1980, 5'6", same height as Steve, 135 pound. Kratz talks about just tossing the body into the back of the car, and that it couldn't be done, could it? Collar length hair, address in Hilbert. This is to do with obviously Steve's vehicle, the Grand Am, which of course interestingly had blood stains in it, where you would expect blood stains to be. Apparently, as we discover later, this vehicle wasn't insured. This one was a Ford F-350 truck, very nice truck. And what we've got here, obviously the Teresa's vehicle, a 1999 Toyota in dark green, and of course the now infamous license plates, Sam William Henry 582. What have we got next? Oh, we've got a videotape of a interview and a little micro cassette of the conversation. Arrest 1 of Stephen. Arrest time. Now it's saying he was arrested on the 15th of November. Fassbender and Wiegert. Arrested on the 9th of November for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Okay, here we get the main point of what we're looking at is, just to see, how different Steve was able to cope under the assertions, as we'll discover, of Wiegert and Fassbender. On Wednesday, November the 9th, 2005, Tom Fassbender reviewed a criminal complaint prepared by Calumet County District Attorney Kenneth, the R stands for Rapist, Kratz. The criminal complaint was for the Circuit Court in Manitowoc County, state of Wisconsin. The criminal complaint charged Stephen Avery with 1 count of possession of a firearm by a felon. D.A. Kratz was acting as special prosecutor for Manitowoc County. After reviewing the criminal complaint, Fassbender swore to it before Kratz and signed the criminal complaint. The criminal complaint was subsequently filed with the Manitowoc County Clerk of Circuit Court on the 9th of on the Wednesday under case number etc. 05375. Fassbender subsequently received the arrest warrant for Stephen Avery, which was signed by Judge Jerome Fox. Also on that date, Fassbender and Wiegert, better known as Bert and Ernie, of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, took possession of a search warrant for the person of Stephen Avery. More specifically, a sample of his DNA, both finger and palm prints, and an inspection of his person for any wounds. The endorsement on the search warrant showed that it had been received on the 7th of November at 7:08 p.m. Wiegert had sworn to it and signed the affidavit for the search warrant before Kratz. Getting back to the Wednesday at approximately 12:33, Bert and Ernie arrived at the residence of Earl Avery, so there we go, at the town of Gibson, Whitelaw. Wiegert rode with Fassbender as Fassbender drove his state vehicle. For the purposes of this report, after a subject is first identified, they will be referred to by their first names. Wiegert knocked on the door facing toward the rear of the property, and Stephen's mother, Dolores, answered the door. Wiegert identified himself and Fassbender to her and asked if Stephen was there, and Dolores advised she would get him. She then closed the door. Wiegert and Fassbender waited for some time. They claim at least 5 minutes, at which time Wiegert again knocked on the door. Dolores answered the door and advised that Steve was on the phone, and she again went back into the residence and closed the door. After waiting another similar amount of time, Wiegert knocked again. This time Stephen came to the door accompanied by Dolores. Stephen was talking on a cellular phone at the time. Stephen told Wiegert that he was speaking with the press and that they wanted to talk to him. Wiegert took the phone and spoke very briefly and then hung up. Not prepared to wait. I'm the law. What I say goes. Wiegert then explained to Stephen that there were 2 reasons he and Fassbender were there. He explained to Steve that he and Fassbender had a search warrant for Stephen's DNA, his finger and palm prints, and an examination of his body. Wiegert also explained that he was not the only one from whom these things were being requested. At approximately 12:47, Wiegert advised Steve that they also had an arrest warrant for him for the charge of possession of a firearm by a felon. Wiegert and Fassbender, Bert and Ernie explained to Stephen that the arrest warrant was prepared by Calumet County District Attorney Sweaty Price, and that Bert and Ernie had nothing to do with that. They advised that Sweaty was concerned because he was aware of the violation and felt compelled to act on it. Steve stated that he was not aware he could not possess guns. He also stated, not being aware of it is not a valid excuse in the eyes of the law if you're not allowed to. Not knowing about it would obviously not hold much water. He also stated that the guns were owned by Rolly Johnson, who owns the trailer that he lives in. Wiegert told Steve that he would not place him in handcuffs if he was cooperative and did not cause any problems, and Steve advised that he would not cause any problems. Steve was asked if he wanted to obtain a jacket to take with him, and he advised yes. He was advised that Wiegert and Fassbender would have to accompany Stephen into the house to do so. Everyone then went into the kitchen area of the house, at which time Stephen obtained a jacket, and the jacket was searched. Wiegert also searched Steve's person for weapons. So obviously we're talking about a time frame just after they got back from Crivets, and obviously they weren't allowed back onto the yard, the salvage yard. So obviously Stephen is across at Earl's, which is at also comes under the town of Gibson, so really not far away at all. Bert and Ernie then escorted Steve out of that residence and to Fassbender's vehicle, where Stephen was seated in the rear passenger's side seat. Wiegert sat in the back seat next to Steve behind the driver's seat. Upon Fassbender entering the vehicle, he activated a Sony microcassette handheld recorder containing a microcassette tape. And as they departed Earl's residence, he confirmed the house number was 6904. Fassbender then began the drive to the Aurora Medical Center. Right, okay, so 5000 Memorial Drive, Two Rivers, for the execution of the search warrant on Stephen. At 12:50, while in Fassbender's vehicle, Wiegert utilized a Miranda Warnings form and read the Miranda Warning to Steve. Wiegert asked Steve if he understood each of his rights, and he advised that he did. Wiegert asked Steve if he was willing to talk, and he advised yes. Stephen signed the Miranda Warnings waiver at 12:52. Wiegert signed as a witness, and so did Fassbender later that day. While driving to the Aurora Medical Center, there were many periods of general conversation between Steve, Wiegert, and Fassbender. Other portions of the conversation included the following. Stephen advised that he has had his Ford pickup almost a year, or since last December or this January. Stephen advised he stayed in his car last night because he wanted to be by himself. Stephen advised there were probably 3,000 to 5,000 cars in the Avery salvage yard. He advised that they only have one wrecker and two flatbeds. He advised it is mostly Earl that does the wrecker service, although Charles does a little and Steve does a little. Pertaining to the gun charge, Steve advised he wished he would have known that. Investor Wiegert asked, "What's that?" Steve advised the guns. Wiegert inquired if he meant about having them in the house, and Steve said yes. He said that he did hunt and fish, but ultimately corrected that and advised he used to hunt. He advised he knew of Harp Lake, and that the last time he fished at Tuma Lake was last year. Stephen said he has a Skidoo snowmobile. He said it is not in his name yet. He said he does not own a motorcycle. Stephen asked what the DNA samples were for. He was essentially advised that samples were being obtained from everyone that has been around the area and that they are used as standards for comparison. He advised that they already have plenty of his. He advised that when customers come to purchase parts at the salvage yard, they are sent back to get the part they need. Stephen advised that the vehicles are generally put in rows by makes. He advised them they do not have a computerized system. Stephen said that before the vehicles are put into the yard, they have to drain them of the oil and fluids, because oils and fluids you cannot compress. He advised they also take the batteries out, yes, because there's fluid in there. When advised if they take the transmission fluid out, he advised they do if they have plugs, a plug hole in which to empty the transmission fluid. Stephen advised they then use the loader to carry the vehicles down into the yard. Stephen advised that Stephen and Earl do that. He advised that they have no employees and it is just himself, Charles, Earl, and Alan. He advised his nephew Christopher helps once in a while, but he has not been around there in a while, and that Christopher is Chuck's son. Stephen said that Charles lives alone. He confirmed that one of Charles's boys was killed and did not believe that that was too long ago. He advised Charles was currently staying with his daughter. Stephen advised he does not think that Brian has worked in the yard since he has been working, presumably elsewhere. He advised that Brian works at a company in Two Rivers. Okay. Stephen advised that while he was in prison, he was in Green Bay, Fox Lake, Stanley. He advised he was also housed in Tennessee and said that Tennessee was worse than Wisconsin. Stephen said that he works every day, most of the time, Monday through Friday, and starts at 8, and he takes lunch at 12 for a half hour. He then eats lunch at his mother's. He said after lunch he goes back to work, He said that it's 12:30 and then he works till 5. He said that most of the time he goes to his mother's to eat, and lots of times he goes there for supper. He advised he normally eats supper between 5 and 6. He advised after supper he does not go out, but usually goes to see his fiancée Jodie at the Manitowoc County Jail. He said he is engaged and is going to get married when this is all over. When asked if he hangs at bars, he advised no, not since he was young. He indicated he rarely drinks. By 1:20, they arrive at the Aurora Medical Centre in Two Rivers. Fassbender parked his vehicle in the Sally Port. No idea what the Sally Port is. I don't think it's really that important. Near the emergency room entrance. And he and Wiegert escorted Steve into the hospital where they sat, where the search warrant was executed. Thinking, is the Sally Port when you take somebody in on like a trolley? I don't know. As I say, it doesn't matter. Stephen first went into an examination room where RN and SAN nurse Faye L. Fritsch, of date of birth 1970, and Dr. Laura Vogel. Oops, dear, that's not a nice name to encounter, Steve. But you were a bit concerned when you heard the name Vogel. Schwartz, the medical director, did the body exam of Steve. Fritsch conducted the exam while Dr. Vogel Schwartz assisted. Also in the room were Wiegert and Sergeant Bill Tyson of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Tyson took photographs of any injuries pointed out by Fritsch. Fritsch also documented the injuries. Fassbender was also in the examination room, but not the entire time. Fassbender asked Steve if he wanted something to drink, and he said he would take a soda. Fassbender left the room and got him a soda. During the exam, many smaller scratches, scars, and sores were documented and photographed. Steve told Wiegert that many of the sores were torch marks. You see, because they're dismantling cars, and as we see, they use an oxyacetylene welder in order to assist with cutting. There was one particular wound that entailed a cut to Stephen's middle finger on his right hand. The cut had scabbed over. Towards the end of the examination, Fritsch had the lights turned out in the examination room and utilised a Woods light to illuminate any secretions on Steve's body. Fritsch subsequently took 2 swabs in Stephen's groin area. After that, she continued and was going to take some more swabs when Special Agent Fassbender and Wiegert conferred and determined that the search warrant did not call for that type of exam. Wiegert immediately stopped Fritsch and the exam was concluded. Wiegert had Fritsch dispose of the 2 swabs into the biohazard sharps bin. Fritsch also took buccal swabs for Stephen's saliva. Of course, we know the significance of these 2 swabs that were supposedly thrown into the biohazard sharps bin. Most likely one was retained by Wiegert as being could be of use later on. Stephen was then escorted into a separate room where corrections officers Larry Schrader and Laurie Fleming of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department obtained his finger and palm prints. Okay. At approximately 2:15, Fassbender, Wiegert, and Stephen left the medical center. Wiegert and Stephen exited the hospital at a different location, and Fassbender picked them up. Upon entering the vehicle, Tom turned the recording back on, and Tom commented to Steve that that wasn't too bad, was it? And Stephen said no. Wiegert reminded Stephen of his rights, and Stephen said he had nothing to hide. Wiegert inquired if Stephen still wanted to talk, and Stephen stated it depended what it was, and said yes. Wiegert inquired if that meant he still wanted to talk, and Stephen advised yes. Wiegert advised Stephen that they were going to the Two Rivers Police Department to talk. While en route, Stephen commented that they were working on a pardon for him, and if that happens, then he can go hunting. Upon arrival at the Two Rivers Police Department, Fassbender parked in their Sallyport. Stephen was then escorted into the police department, and he requested to use the restroom and was allowed to do so. Stephen still had the soda from the hospital. Tom inquired if Stephen wanted anything else to drink at that time, and he advised no. So at approximately 2:24 in the afternoon, Stephen took a seat in an interview room at the Two Rivers Police Department. The interview room was equipped for video and audio recording, and said interview was video and audio recorded. Fassbender left the room for a moment, and during that time, Steve asked about his Van Damme and whether it was done yet. Stephen said to take it to Earl's. During the interview, Wiegert acted as the primary questioner, while Fassbender took notes. The following is a synopsis of information provided by Stephen and is not verbatim. A transcript will be prepared at a later date. So Mark reminded Steve of Miranda, inquired if he still wanted to talk, and Steve said yes. The interview essentially started with talk about the gun charge against Steve. Steve acknowledged that there was a rifle, .22, in his house, but indicated that it was Rollie Johnson's gun hanging up in his bedroom. Stephen said he never shot that gun. Stephen advised he lived in the trailer probably over a year. He advised that he lives by himself and his girlfriend and is currently in the county jail. Prior to her going to jail, she lived with him. Steve acknowledged that he was with Earl on Friday while Earl was shooting at cars with a .30-06 rifle. Steve said he did not shoot the gun, just Earl. Steve advised this occurred on Friday sometime in the afternoon. Stephen advised this occurred down by the crushed cars. Wiegert used the table to depict the area in question. Stephen advised that crushed cars are down behind Chuck's residence. The road goes down to the pit, and that the crushed cars are right below the hill. There is a crusher located there too. Steve said that usually Norbs crushes the cars, but he and Earl crush some too. He said Norbs left the crusher there and said they could use it. Stephen advised he had crushed the blue car that was in the crusher, but could not remember when he did it. Stephen said it was not Friday, but said it was not in there that long, and it could have been the week before. Stephen said he mostly takes cars out of the crusher after crushing them, but on that occasion he was in a hurry. Steve talked about driving his Grand Am up north on Saturday morning, a little after 6, with his mother and Brian. He advised that Charles had brought up the flatbed Friday night. At about this time, Steve indicated he was sick of saying the story. And Wiegert said he wanted to hear it from him, so he knows exactly. So he knows exactly how it happened, and essentially, so nothing was lost in translation. Stephen then talked about what he did on Monday of last week, when the girl from the auto trader came out to take a picture of the van. Stephen advised he got up between 6 and 6:30 and started work at 8. He then worked until 11 and then went home and stayed home. Well, we know he also changed the battery on the van. He said made a couple of phone calls on his phone and called his fiance's lawyer once or twice. Stephen said he might have used his cellular phone and called the auto trader office at about 8 or 8:30 to set up an appointment. He advised he put it under his sister's name, Barb Yander. He advised it was Barb's vehicle. Stephen said personnel at auto trader told him it might be this Monday or it might be next Monday. He said he then went back to work. Stephen said he called auto trader one more time and was told she was going to come out. He believed this may have been after 11. Stephen thought he tried to call her, Teresa, on her cellular phone, but she did not answer. He said Auto Trader had given him her phone number quite a while ago. He thought he just waited after that. Stephen said he tried to call Teresa 2 or 3 times, including once after she left that day once after she left that day to tell her that he wanted another picture. So when Teresa called at the yard after she left that day, he then phoned her. He tried to phone her because he wanted to take another picture, but she did not answer her phone. He believed he made the call just after his mother had stopped by his house. He said he wanted her, Teresa, to photograph a loader which was on his road by the blue house trailer. Stephen said she arrived between 2 and 2:30, took a picture of the van which was located between him and Barb by the driveway. He said Teresa usually came between 2 and 3. Stephen said he met Teresa about a year or more ago, and she had been there maybe 15 times. He said the time prior to this was either 1 or 2 Mondays before, and she took a picture of a Grand Prix. Stephen did not know that her name was Teresa. Stephen said he was coming out of his trailer when she took the picture, after which she wrote down the serial number. He said there was a $40 charge, and he paid her in cash outside of and by the van and gave her his ad. He said he followed her to her vehicle and she gave him an Auto Trader book. Stephen said she never came into his house that day and she was there about 5 minutes or less. When asked if Teresa had ever been in his house, Stephen said Teresa may have stood by his door, but that was a long time ago. Stephen advised that his sister Barb was not home, but Bobby was home because his truck was home. Stephen said his conversation with Teresa was mostly hi and bye, and was nothing more than that on any of the occasions she had been there. Stephen said he put the Auto Trader magazine by his computer and then came back out, and as he was going to walk over to Bobby, he then saw that Bobby's vehicle was gone. Stephen said he was in the middle of his driveway and looked down the road and saw Teresa almost at the end of the road signalling a left turn. Stephen thought he then went back in the house and he may have watched TV or listened to the radio or ate something. Stephen said about 5 or 10 minutes later his mother came down with her golf cart and brought him his mail. Again, this nonsense about Brendan bringing the mail. No. He thought he sat on the golf cart. He thought he sat on the golf cart and talked for a while, then went back inside and may have listened to radio or watched TV. Stephen advised he has not burnt anything in his burn barrel for quite a while, probably longer than a week, and he said he did not burn anything that night. His burn barrel is out in front of his house. Stephen said the week before last, or over a week ago, and before Teresa was there, he burnt brush, some tires and some garbage in an area behind his house right by his dock. He said the tires did not have rims. Stephen remembered spending time at Barb's because Bobby had gotten a deer from a car deer accident. Stephen thought this was on the Monday. Steve said that Barb's boys normally get home from school around 3 to 3:45. Stephen said he was home all night that Monday night by himself, except when he went over by Barb's. Stephen advised he could not remember what time it was when he went and looked at the deer. Stephen said that around 5 o'clock, Earl and Bob Fabian came down in his mother's golf cart for a minute and then went looking for rabbits or something. After that, he said he went over to Barb's for a short time and then went back home. He advised it was dark already, or almost dark. Steve said he did not do anything or go anywhere that night after he came home from Barb's. He said he mostly stayed close at home after that because Jody calls. He believed the first time Jody called was around 5 or something, and then 8 or 9, around about then. He could not remember what else he did. He advised most of the time he sits around and goes back and forth between Barb's and his home. Stephen said he stayed around Barb's talking until the deer was cleaned up. He said he did not help clean the deer and that Bobby did that. Stephen said he probably went to bed by 9 that night. He said he lies in bed and watches TV going through the channels. Steve remembered a couple of things on a sex program and specified channels numbered 501 to 512. He said it was not paid per show and that he had, in fact, a package. He probably did that between 9 and 10. He believed it was sex between two women that he was watching. He specified that it was between channels, somewhere between either 5:14, 13 or 14. Steve said he usually watches the news at 10 until the weather, and most of the time he turns it off and goes to sleep. Stephen said he could have watched the news Monday night because he remembered that it was supposed to rain or something. Stephen said he slept all night and did not go anywhere or get up. He said the alarm is set for 6 most of the time. Stephen said on Tuesday he went to work at 8, and most of that week he worked in the garage. He said that on Tuesday and Wednesday he worked all day 8 to 5, and Thursday he went to an auction. Thursday night he went to see Jody. Tuesday night he went to see Jody at 7. He said he drove there in the Grand Am. He said his truck is the only vehicle he has insurance on. Remember that in America, in some states, it's not like in the UK where you have to have insurance. Unfortunately, in America, some people regard paying for car insurance as a bit of a gamble. You're investing a lot of money for something that you might never use. I think I prefer the UK system that if you're going to drive on the road, you have to have insurance. Anyway, Stephen said he could not remember what he did Wednesday night. He said most of the time he goes to bed close to the same time every night. Steve said on Thursday at about 7, he and Earl went to an insurance auto auction in Appleton, which started at 9. He said they stopped at McDonald's on the way. Stephen said the auction ends between 11 and 12. Stephen said they bought a 99 Grand Am, which they sold the motor out of and put the vehicle in the salvage yard. Stephen said he got back around 2 and then went to work. He could not remember what he did Thursday night. Stephen said he worked 8 to 5 on Friday and had a lunch at his mother's. He commented that he always has lunch at his mother's. Stephen said he eats supper a lot at his mother's. He thought he ate at his mother's Friday night and afterwards went home. Stephen then stated he believed it was Friday night with the deer. Stephen said he was done. Stephen then said he was done and he could not do it, that it was all confusing. And of course, most significantly, what did he have the bonfire the Monday night that trees are there? He seems to think it was the week before. He's not denying that there was a bonfire burning the brush. But isn't it interesting how you've got also Lisa Bush, the bus driver, who says that she could see Teresa taking photographs. Well, Lisa almost certainly saw Teresa taking photographs, but not in the day in question. That would have been when the cars for sale that she was photographing would have been at the turnaround where the bus stops to let the boys off, and also it's actually where all the mailboxes are. So I don't think we can be too hard on Steve, who said Stephen then said he was done and he could not do it, that it was all confusing. In other words, he couldn't carry on. He was asked if he wanted to talk anymore and he said no, that it was too hard trying to remember all these details. One can assume. He continued to make comments such as, it's puzzling, it gives him a headache, doesn't even know the dates, it's all mixed up, and he doesn't like it. He said most of the time he knows what he does. He said there is pressure and that he was trying to do the right thing. Stephen was told he could talk about other things. He said, what am I supposed to talk about? Stephen was asked if he wanted to take a break and he said he did not know what good that would do. He was asked if he wanted to talk about other things. He said, like what? Stephen was asked if he wanted a soda and he said he was good. Stephen was asked how he met Jody and he said he met her at a gas station and commented that if he would have stayed there, she would not have been in trouble. He advised that she had gotten arrested for drunk driving and she was currently serving 9 months in jail. Now, I'm going to leave it there. That's our first half of looking at this. I think the next half is equally interesting. Apologies if you've seen all this and read all this before, but I think it's just so important to go over this stuff to see what's going on, how the case is, Sorry, let's start again. I think it's particularly interesting to see how Steve sort of reacts to this sort of intense questioning compared with other, as I say, in particular, Brendan. Anyway, as I say, we'll hold it there. I was, as I say, particularly interested to see that, having read so much about police interrogation in Leo's book. And yeah, dark side, it is. It's always good to go through this stuff again, just to recap, so that we've got it absolutely clear, what was said, when it was said, what's going on. Okay, so as I say, we'll leave it there. As I say, please do. The message from Jerry wishing me a happy new year. I think it's perfectly acceptable for me to accept those best wishes on behalf of everybody here, everybody that supports truth and justice for Teresa, Steve, and Brendan. Well, Sharon, yes, I think the clue is in the title. But in case you were wondering, it's to do with the search warrant that was issued for the arrest of Stephen Avery, and the search warrant, for his DNA and inspection of cuts, grazes, sores, that kind of stuff. So this was the search warrant that was issued. I think it's in the title here. Yes, that's right. It's the search warrant of the 8th of November 2005. Okay. Aye, of course not for you, Sharon. Of course not, yes. Anyway, I'm going to say cheerio, and we'll catch you all again soon with part 2. I'm heading out for another long walk. Yesterday, I walked all the way to Cloven and back. How many miles was that, Eunice? Nearly 10 miles. It was good fun. We stopped on for 1 or 2 libations, didn't we, darling? Yes, 1 or 2 whiskies were consumed. Anyway, we'll catch you all soon. Bye for now.